We've got a concert tonight?
Yeah.
All right, I will pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. First item of business are the minutes of the regular board meeting November 13th. Everyone's had a chance to look at them. I will entertain a motion.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes from November 13th meeting.
Second.
So I properly moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the 13th. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion passes. The next item of business are the general fund vouchers 80984 through 80949 and wire transfers 2024-0207 through 2024-0259. I'll entertain a motion.
I motion to approve the general fund vouchers and wire transfers.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve the general fund and wire transfers as read. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Next item of business, motion passes. The next item of business is the public comment. Does anybody have anything that they would like to share with us? All right, seeing that there is none, we'll move on to the next item of business, which is the board business approval of resignations.
Okay, we do have one resignation for this month. We have Dominic Dimmler, elementary food service employee, and he submitted his resignation effective last day before holiday break, December 22nd. So we've already worked on the posting and getting that posted out there, or getting it out there today. So.
All right. Do we need a motion on? Yes, we do. So
Yes.
I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the resignations.
All second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve our resignations. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion passes. The next item of business is our approval of hires.
Okay, so we have 4 this time around. So it's always nice to have more hires than resignations. So, so the first one, as you guys were coming in here, so Eve Mansky is our newly hired district bookkeeper, and so she's here tonight with Mrs. Karnick, and they've been working together in the office for a little over a week, starting that process of transitioning. So we've got Eve here, so welcome her. And then the other positions that we have for approval for hires are Kelsey Bauer as an elementary special education paraprofessional. We also have Pastor Brian Anderson as a forensics advisor. And then we also have Montana Niles as a junior high girls basketball coach. That was one item that was a TBD in October when we approved the fall or winter coaches roster. That one was empty, so Montana Niles has agreed to fill that position. So those are the 4.
Start before the season, or is she just starting now?
Their season doesn't start till January.
Okay.
Yeah, the basketball in
Girls.
school, the school
Junior
season
high,
for
yeah.
girls. Yep, boys is before Christmas. So those are the 4 approvals that we have.
I move to approve. Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve our 4 new hires. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion passes. The next item of business, I believe we wanted to table.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, consideration approval of a contract for bookkeeper training specialist, and this is, as the board has discussed, a transition for having Mrs. Karnick assist into the future as needed. But yeah, I would recommend discuss that and close with the compensation and stuff.
All right, we'll move that to the end then. And the next item of business will be the review of the Act 20 reading legislation.
Okay, so I'm going to throw my screen up or my computer up on the screen here, and so what you're going to see here when I put this up is a whole lot of information. And what I want you to know is that we're not going to dive deep into this. This is going to be like a overview, first introduction to this. So it's the goal here tonight is for the board to just walk away with a basic understanding of what Act 20 is and so on. So the Act 20, and it's booting up here. Act 20 was a legislation that was passed last summer. It was negotiated between legislation and the governor, or legislators and the governor. There was input from the DPI along the way. So it passed with some little controversy, but not a ton, honestly. But basically, it's a law that is meant to sort of revamp and dictate how early literacy, specifically grades pre-K through 3, are approached in Wisconsin schools. So, okay, come on here.
Adjust the input, Chris.
Yeah, well, I know with this machine, a lot of times if it's not reading the input, I just plug it back into HDMI 1 and then it should, there we go.
Takes care of it.
It takes care of it. It's kind of funny about that. If it's, I guess I gotta make that a little bit larger. So I'm in a second here, I'm going to show you this slideshow that is way too detailed, and we're not going to review the whole thing. But this just shows you, this is extensive in terms of the things that Act 20 encompasses. Make that a little bit bigger for everybody. It encompasses things related to literacy instruction and curriculum, requires a statewide reading screener. These are all aspects that include requirements in Act 20. Okay, it requires some different kinds of family communication. It allows for, I think it's 60-some different positions that will be created statewide through the DPI that are literacy coaches to support literacy instruction throughout the state of Wisconsin. It includes required training for teachers, which Mrs. Anderson's going to talk about how we're already kind of on the road for that. Required training for administrators who work in elementary schools. Just some of the new, all the requirements that will be in place for students who are identified as not on track for literacy. So you can see it's fairly extensive. So my point of showing all these headings to you is just so you get an idea of that it's fairly intensive and it's pretty impactful for schools. So, okay, I'm going to show you this slideshow. Whoops, I'll back up. So this slideshow has 50 or 60 slides. So just understand, we're not going to go through all of them, okay? So the headings that you saw in this document are like the big topic headings inside of this slideshow, okay? So just on a very, very cursory overview, so basically, it's saying that any kind of literacy instruction in the state of Wisconsin has to include, and Teresa, feel free to jump in here at any point, has to include these aspects of literacy instruction. So if you think back over the last 20, 30 years, there's been sort of the so-called kind of reading wars between phonics and whole language and so on. And basically, and you hear the term science of reading thrown about. These bullet points here represent what people refer to as the science of reading. So the approach that is the preferred approach through this legislation, and that I think has grown to become recognized as best practice. Again, we're not going to get into what all those things mean, but it's more of a phonics-based approach. And this is, again, related to early reading, pre-K through 3 specifically. But of course, it's going to impact other grades in the elementary too. It makes it illegal, prohibited, to use what's known as 3-cueing instruction, which is kind of the opposite, the model where it's kind of this whole language idea that you're going to infer what the word is through pictures and other methods. It's basically saying that is an ineffective way of teaching, and you need to teach kids how to decode text. We need to, basically, there's going to be a recommended list of curriculum materials for teaching literacy, and that list will be put out by a reading council or a curriculum council that's part of this, and that we will be, trying to work to pick something off of that list. Clear Lake is currently in the stages of adopting a new literacy curriculum, so the timing here is actually good. And if we adopt something from the list, then up to 50% of it gets paid for, or we'll get grants to help pay for it. So this document was created by CISA 11, so you'll notice in here it'll say a link will be inserted here when the grant application directs. So understand that this was passed in June or July, and they're expecting implementation of a lot of this by next school year. you know, and so it's they're building the car while they're driving it down the road, so it's pretty fast, which, you know, the skeptical side of me will say may lead to some interesting times and maybe some not so great implementation across the state, you know. So here's the other big one, is there will be a single statewide reading readiness screener. So right now we use FastBridge as our reading screener. We used to use STAR. So this is going to mandate that every public school is going to use the same screener. They still haven't picked it yet, and it's going to be implemented in the spring, in the fall of 24. So just give you an idea of how fast this is being.
Know by July.
But wouldn't you think
Yeah.
the curriculum would be help base what that is?
Well, the screener is just more the fall, winter, spring, like where are you in terms of the skills, and then the curriculum is, you know, the tool that you use to help them learn the skills. So, but again, it's fast track. They're in the process, and you know they're going to come out with. We're hoping it's FastBridge because that's the one we already use. So, 4K will also have a statewide screener, and I don't even know if it has to be the same one or a different one. So. It's going to evaluate all those things that are part of the science of reading. Again, I'm breezing through this very fast. Families will be notified how their kids do on the statewide screener. We don't necessarily do that for all kids right now. I mean, we do it at parent-teacher conferences. It's like, I should say we do, but for elementary kids. But this is going to require that, particularly for students going on to this part, diagnostic reading assessment. If you score below the 25th percentile, it triggers certain actions that are required by the school. So you can see within 10 days, there has to be a diagnostic. If you're less than the 25th percentile, then it triggers that you need to then go in deeper and have a diagnostic assessment done. The results of that will then be shared with parents, and then basically, in a nutshell, what it does is it requires interventions for somebody who is in that lowest 25th percentile based on the diagnosis. Now, we already do that. You know, that's what our RTI model is, response to intervention. That's basically what that is right now. But it's going to require a little bit more, I would say, notification, a little bit more documentation. So that's the next part of this, family notifications. There are some things that are specifically required. So, and again, you see at the bottom here, a link will be inserted here when the family notification sample template is available. So I think what it's going to be is, you know, we'll have, and most schools will have, some sort of a form to notify parents to say, hey, you know, your child was identified as scoring below the 25th percentile. Here's what we're going to do. I mentioned the statewide early literacy coaches. The law created these positions and funded these positions. One of the things that I will be a little skeptical about is where are all these 60 literacy coaches going to come from? My fear is they're going to come from public schools. They're going to swipe away people who work in schools right now or work at CSAs right now, and it's going to create a void is my fear, my concern. Required reading training for teachers. This is another big one, and Teresa will come back and talk about this. So there are there's a list of basically like 10 different types of literacy training for teachers that would meet the requirement. We're already doing one of them, or we're already underway with doing one of them. So, but anyway, by July 1st of 25, if you teach 5K or through grade 3, if you teach reading, you need to start this training by July 1st of 25. Not this summer, but next summer, a year from this summer. So we're ahead of the game a little bit on that one. So here's some examples of how CISA 11 is supporting that. There's required training for administrators. There's some questions about this. So for example, right now, Mrs. Anderson and Mrs. Gillick are actually going through the same training that the teachers are going through. The question is whether that's going to qualify them under this part right here. Again, July 25. This is like any new bill or new law. There's going to be things that get interpreted and rules that could get put out by the DPI related to that. Students who are identified less than 25th percentile and then take that diagnostic reading test will have a personal reading plan. Basically, it's going to lay out for the parents and for the teachers, okay, here are the ways that we're going to measure their progress, and here are the interventions that we're going to do with the child. There's family notifications required. This is similar for the 4K. I don't know if it's just 4K or if it's 5K. Again, there needs to be a remediation plan for students who are in those youngest grades. DPI is going to ask for specific data from all the schools related to this. There's a required promotion policy. This was the most controversial part of it, and this was the part that some of the people from the education world objected to. Basically, the initial draft basically said if a student didn't make progress enough, they would be retained in that grade and not move ahead. People who work in the education world understand that that is not good practice, and it doesn't, retaining kids in a grade doesn't help them learn, and it doesn't provide good outcomes. Instead, you should give interventions to kids. So they modified the stance on a little bit, and there are ways that to go around not retaining kids because of a test score. Obviously, you need to account for special needs and need to account for learning differences. If the student has done the interventions and they're still not learning, then there's probably, on track for qualifying for an IEP and extra services through special education. So I'm just oversimplifying and just on a real high level here. So this talks about all the different ways to, work with the promotion policy and retention policy. The stuff about bilingual programs, again, that's not been real clarified to us yet. I'm gonna kind of breeze through that. Funding for Act 20, again, there's not a ton to discuss here either. Some of it, there's some funding behind some of it, but also it's kind of an unfunded mandate. It's a new expectation that we have, and it's not going to be fully funded. However, a lot of the things that it's asking us to do, we're already doing. There was a curriculum council created, Early Literacy Curriculum Council, and there were people that were appointed to this council, some of them by DPI, some of them by the state senate, some of them by the governor, some of them by the assembly, I believe. They all had different numbers of people they could appoint to this committee. So that's the group that is working currently to figure out what should be the universal screener in the state of Wisconsin and what is going to be on the recommended list of curriculum. So their timeline for all of this work is very aggressive. It's kind of difficult for, it's difficult to implement in such a short timeline, but it is the law. So this just clarifies the role of district reading specialists. It doesn't change a ton. Educator prep programs, this is just, like the UW systems. If you want to get trained teachers for licensure in the state, it just requires some regulations related to that. Choice program, this would be the private school choice program, so that that doesn't apply to us. That's the end of it right there. Did I do pretty well going through all that in, 10 minutes? Did I do 5-10 minutes? Did I do okay? So again, please know that the point of this is just to kind of give you an introductory overview of the Act 20 is a thing and what it has to be, not an in-depth understanding. That's not really our goal here, and honestly, that shouldn't be something you have to concern yourselves with. That's what we have to concern ourselves with, is doing it that way. So Teresa was just going to mention a few things, Mrs. Anderson, about some of the ways that we are actually set up in a good place with some of the requirements.
Mm-hmm. So we already do the screener 3 times a year. That's something that if you've had kids in the elementary, that's been ongoing. And with our Fast Bridge program, actually it has some progress monitoring built right into it. That's why we had switched into Fast Bridge 3 years ago, because we have that piece now to kind of monitor more closely, to really be more clear of what the kids are lagging in. And so it does identify our students, and we already do that. So one thing that this will add is more that formal process of, the communication to the families. Certainly we do that at parent-teacher conferences, but it'll just be a little more closer to the actual screener test, and then making that communication more open about what is being done and how can both home and school meet the needs of their kids. In regards to the the science of reading and those pieces. So last summer, I had asked, just kind of put a survey out to the staff. You know, this is not required, but how many of you would be interested in beginning this journey of learning more about early literacy and really, you know, being the best that we can be of teaching reading to our students? And we had 13 classroom teachers, so there's every teacher from JK through 6th grade. There's a representative from each, and some it's full grade levels. All 3 special ed teachers, our reading specialist, and myself. So there are 18 of us, just by, hey, do you want to do this? So that just shows the commitment. This is done on their own time. It's an extra 50 to 60 hours. We're on tool number 3 in December here, so they do their learning on their own time, and then Andrea Jillick and I lead a session to each month to say, well, how is this now going to be used in the classroom? What are those things we're actually going to take? What we're noticing is in my undergrad program and in my reading teacher, some grad program work, it's the things we've learned, but it's reinforcing what really should be done. So a lot of these things that are happening are currently happening in our classrooms, but this is now just being very clear with the phonemic awareness, the phonics, the decoding, all of the pieces, and putting it together and really making it the program. So I'm really pleased with how the staff is embracing this, and I will say I had some of the best educational conversations, again, around these kinds of topics, because it's about student learning, and it is really, really impactful when you hear educators talking about how they're going to reach students based on what we're learning. There's a statistic that says 10% of professional development actually makes it into the classroom. In Clear Lake, it's going to make it into the classroom. It already is, but we're ensuring that what we're learning is really going to affect the kids in big ways. And we also just met today about adopting and going through a journey of picking a new resource. So currently we have a Reach for Reading, and we've had that for a number of years, and we're ready to move into, you know, choosing something different. So Andrea and I had gone to a session on how to go through, I mean, they want your money. These programs want your money. These companies want your money. How do you truly know if it's going to be a great fit for Clear Lake? So we have our timeline here. We're really goal oriented in December here. So we're moving through these little post-its and keeping right on track that by the end of March, beginning of April, we should have a resource chosen out of the hundreds of options. Right now, we just calculated and documented some top 10, and we will narrow that down to top 3, bring it back to our committee, and have some reps do some Zoom times with us to say, you know, why should we go with you? What is the big thing for you? And all of the top 10 that we have pulled from of these resources they're meeting expectations. So they would be, like Mr. Peterson had mentioned, there could be some reimbursement money available to our district if we choose these certain ones that are going to be on this Wisconsin list. Well, they're using the same websites called Ed Reports that we're using to find those great resources. So we have no doubt it's going to match something that Wisconsin says, yes, these are the best of the best. So that's our journey, and we're really excited and motivated to make some good choices and move forward.
Yeah, so really 2 years ago we were moving more with, you know, emphasizing phonics and things like that, really, you know, which is about the science of reading when we're working with our CISA consultants and things like that. So, you know, we aren't too alarmed by this because we're on the right track with the things we're already doing and already have in place. And yeah, so March, April, we should be hopefully coming, or might go into May, come into the board with a recommendation to purchase a new reading resource.
So in the presentation, it talked about a rubric to make those decisions. When you showcase that, are you also going to showcase how that correlates with the rubric and meets the expectations?
Yeah, so and you can go onto Ed Reports and you can look up resources, and they have a specific rubric as well. From my understanding, they're pulling from this really quality website. So I would be curious to see what their rubric is stating, because that's our next piece in our committee, is to make sure it's matching the needs that we feel our students need. And so we're, yeah. Exactly.
But if you're gonna get reimbursement, it has to meet their rubric, so we have to, like, if that's where we're going.
They're using ed reports is the word.
Okay.
That's the word we're in. They're using ed reports.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, any more discussion? Then the next item of business is discussion of students' strength, conditioning, and performance program.
Okay, so this is, I just wanted to bring this up in an initial ask of, so we have the opportunity, we've had some discussions with an organization called ETS Performance, and this is something that they do and lead, and they are willing to partner with our school to come to Clear Lake School District and lead our strength and performance program with our students. And so there's obviously a lot more details to that. About a week ago, we met, I had a meeting, invited all of the school district coaches, junior, senior high coaches, and it was very well attended, and in every program I believe was represented, and most head coaches were there, and kind of presented to them some of the possibilities and what it could look like. And just to see, okay, first of all, are the coaches interested in furthering their interest in this or in pursuing it more? And I think that there was definitely a strong consensus among the coaches to say, let's look into this more. And I said then the next step would be for me to bring it to the board to say, is this something you'd be interested in learning more about? A representative from ETS would be willing to come to the next board meeting and present and answer questions, and of course get into some more of those nitty-gritty details of what would it look like, what would the schedule be, what would the costs be, things like that. So I guess I'm asking, would the board be interested in having more information or having...
Yeah, is this a cost that we're looking to put on the student, or is this a cost that we're looking to put in with our own budget?
It would be sort of a mix.
Okay.
So the way they do things is kind of a mix. So some of it would be during the school year stuff would be district funded. The summer things that they do is more of a camp approach. So but I'm also looking to see about creative ways that we could still find ways to incorporate that into our summer school program, and by doing that we could help to fund it too, I hope. So I guess a lot of questions, but I guess is the board interested in learning more about that?
Do we know if the students would be interested in it? I mean, the coaches are, but it sounds like something that the kids actually have to come to.
Yeah.
So if I could add to this, I've been kind of involved with this kind of initiative a little bit from the get-go. In all of our sports, there is, we've got a lot of coaches that aren't full-time coaches. We don't have the coaches like we had when I was going to high school, where we actually had, Mr. Ayer was he was qualified in weight training, and he was qualified in conditioning, he was qualified in performance, speed, and all that stuff. I don't know if we have that person on staff right now. And it's something that the kids aren't privy to if we don't have somebody on staff that's an expert in that. This particular group would fill that void for us, and it will cost some money, but we've got kids that are doing things in the weight room that they're going to hurt themselves because they don't know. And we've got kids that are working hard that aren't achieving the strength they could if they were doing it correctly, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if
I'm not
I went on
against
a
it,
little
Greg.
bit
I'm
too
just want
far
to
on
make
it.
sure that we come at it. If he presents, we understand, is this going to be partially on the student, partially on the school? Where are we looking to do the funding?
Yeah,
and are the students, I know there's a lot of students that are very active in athletic. We got some pretty competitive classes, so.
Well, and the thing is, I want you guys, I think that you guys should know, were we talking about a $36,000 price tag a year?
It could be not quite that much. I think it would be more. It could be less than that, under 30,000. But it's pricey.
Yeah.
You can't staff a position for that, though.
That's kind of what I thought
Yeah,
too.
you're right. Yeah, it would be, yeah, you'd be basically hiring a person.
Is it something that would be available to the public too?
No, it'd be available to students,
Just students?
just to students.
Isn't part of this also, Chris, where they will actually help our coaches in designing their conditioning and their,
That would be the long-range goal.
to bring them
is that our
kinda up to
coaches,
speed.
yeah, our coaches would learn from them. I wouldn't foresee maybe doing this forever. I could see doing it for a period of years till our coaches have developed some more understanding and perhaps. So I think we're kind of getting into weeds of some of
Yeah.
the discussion maybe next. I guess my question is just, do we
Questions.
want to?
I can understand, I see a need for it, sure.
Do we want to? I guess do we want to discuss it more next month? I guess is what I'm
More
asking.
questions?
Yeah, and then what we could do is I could supply more information to you before the meeting, so then, you know, you would be able to be armed with good questions or know some of that information. Is that
Yep.
somebody here and would want to hear more or ask more questions or?
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
we want more.
Okay.
All right, next item of business is review of the state report cards.
Okay, so if you click on that agenda item, so we have all of the different levels. So we have a district report card, we have the high school, junior high school, and elementary Gaylord A. Nelson Educational Center report cards. Then the last document on there is state report card scores, recent history. I would encourage you to look at that one first. That's like a summary document that shows the historical background for going back, 5 years prior to this year. So I guess if once you get into that document, since everyone's in, if you go down to the bottom, is the district scorecard is on the bottom, and that is a compilation of the other above, the school ones above.
Is this a
And
percentile? Is that
No.
the number we're looking for?
no, it's not a percentile or a percentage. It is a number. It is just a score number. So, if we,
Is it out of 100? 68.2 doesn't mean much without some sort of a.
yep. So
measure
then
against
let's
it.
go back then and click on one of the. So I just wanted to see that for perspective.
The max
And then-
score is 100.
Okay, that's all I need to
Yeah,
know.
which nobody gets. I mean, that's like impossible to get. So let's go with the Gaylord and Nelson one. So let's just look at that one together. So everybody got the.
Yeah.
from the bottom.
How do I get out of
So
this?
go back to this tab
I
here.
open them all. so-
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You just have
Go to the, yeah,
17 tabs
do the
open.
Gaylord Nelson one first, just so we're all looking at the same one. So there are 4 parts to so the front page is data and details about your school, what the enrollment is, and how much is open enrolled, and how many students are of which ethnic backgrounds and have disabilities, are economically disadvantaged, English language learners. And then you scroll down, and so the front page has a score summary, the overall score. So this is the elementary school. So this is exciting. 75.6 puts the elementary school into the exceeds expectations category for this year. And so that's something to highlight. That's like a 15-point jump, which is something that hasn't. So that is awesome. And it was really, I think when we all saw that, it was like, oh, it feels like we've been working hard at different things in that area, and to finally see it, like, okay, we're finally turning that corner
What did
here.
we feed them kids for breakfast
So
that day?
yeah, so
You got that score without whole milk.
yeah.
Oh, no, I thought I was going to say for
drink. So anyway, you'll notice right next to that it says priority area weights, and so you'll notice that for Clear Lake, because of our number of kids who have free and reduced lunch, our level of economically disadvantaged, our growth score is a little bit bigger than, or it counts for a little bigger piece of the pie than achievement on that priority area pie chart. If you'll notice that, otherwise the other 4 areas are, it's kind of equal quadrants, 25%. But the growth versus achievement is predicated on your free and reduced score. So then you scroll down to the bottom of that front page. So there's priority areas are achievement. So that's just your overall raw achievement. Your growth score, which is how kids changed and grew from one grade to the next. The same kids looked at in 3rd grade and then looked at in 4th grade and how they changed, for example. And then target group outcomes takes traditionally Groups that traditionally are underserved or tend to be disadvantaged, whether that be minority ethnic groups, whether that be free and reduced, economically disadvantaged, whether that be English language learners, whether that be students with disabilities. How do your target group kids do compared to the general remainder of the population across the state and in your district? And then the on track to graduation is kind of this mystery formula that they take third grade reading scores and it plugs in and somehow says they're on track to graduation. So there's science behind it. I don't understand it. I've heard it explained.
Apparently we do well at it.
I've heard it explained many times, but it's very complicated. So for each, this is the elementary. So for each of those 4 areas, achievement, growth, target group outcomes, and on track to graduation, there then is a page that goes a deep dive into the results for this year and the last couple of years and how they relate to each other. So the areas where the elementary school had such a great increase in improving their score was achievement moved up, but most importantly is that the growth score really rocked it. So if you scroll down to the growth page, which is page 4, you see how it plots across the whole state, put us in the 80th to 90th percentile for the growth area only. So that was a big turning of the corner there. So and with that, the target group outcomes also scored very, very well. So that was a high area of point value. On track to graduation is a good score, but also that still puts us where the majority of schools, elementary schools, are in the state. So what we usually say every year when we look at state testing scores, we can look at the details for all 3 buildings, and then we can look at the district altogether. If we go back and look at that historical document, again, Matt's question is a good one, and we bring that up every year. It's not a percentage. It doesn't mean 64% of kids or anything. It's a score. It's a raw score that gets all added in. So you can see for each of the schools we have the overall achievement, the overall score, the achievement score, the growth score, the closing gap score, and the on track to graduation score, and they all meld together into that overall score. And the overall score for each building adds into the district score. So I always remind people that this is a one-day, or a one-shot, high stakes summative assessment taken in the spring. I think that the way to look at this always with perspective is a long range over time. You look at multiple years of data. We've seen it where one school or one grade can spike up and down. So I always caution when we have big success not to pat ourselves and beat our chests too much with pride, because the following year, you're now matched against that high score for your growth score, and now it's tough to, a lot of times then it's tough to match that, so you can be humbled pretty easily the following year. So I think a measured approach, looking at the long-term perspective, is what's important. And this is something that, when we talk about our strategic plan or when we talk about our goal setting in our schools, this is something that we definitely look at, because this is a measure of how we're doing as a school overall in general, but it's taken once a year. So if we're going to effect change, we have to look more deeply into the universal screener that we do in the fall, winter, and spring, the everyday instruction that we do in the classroom. That's where we turn the corner on this, is through those strategies.
From the high school perspective, how does the on track to graduation actually correlate with our true graduation rate? We're at a 94.4. Our last year was 94.2. Did we really graduate 94% of that class?
No. And that's not a percentage rate, remember, that's a number score.
It's out of 100. It can be a
I know, it's so hard.
I'm sorry. Mathematically, it can be a percentage.
Because on track to graduation measures absenteeism, it measures reading and certain achievement scores, and it does take into account, at the high school level, it does take into account the graduation rate.
But we
Big
get that
time.
on completers too, so
Yeah.
every year we send 1 to 3 kids to Northwoods Tech to get an HSED.
Yeah.
And we do not mark them as a graduate, we mark them as a completer, so we get docked there a little bit.
Yeah.
But
It's just an interesting correlation between, like, this is saying on track, so what is the actual graduation? Because that's what a lot of people look at, is how many people of that class actually cross the stage.
And,
and I guess I can't look at this from
and I would say,
but from the kids that are here on day 1 as a senior in the fall,
Yeah.
I mean, we're at 98 to 100% are either crossing that stage or earning their HSED. Yep.
Like, that's the important thing to tout, is that we can take students to an actual high school diploma or an HSED. Like, that's, to me, that's the end goal of what we're doing.
Right.
and we have, when the DPI tracks graduation rate, they have a 4-year cohort, a 5-year cohort, and a 7-year cohort. So until it's 3 years out of school, because there are kids who, students with an IEP may attend till they're grade 21.
Yeah.
And so in the old days, it was those students didn't graduate because they were continuing their education to 21. We got docked for that.
Mm-hmm.
They fixed that. So those are the ongoing things with data that they're always trying to get schools to raise their hand and say, wait a minute, whoa, you students are still our students, but we're getting dinged as a non-graduate. So things like that. It's
But I think it's important because these report cards go out to the public and people look at them and you're thinking
Absolutely.
94%, but if we
Yeah.
can say how many cross the stage, that's different.
Right.
yeah.
Chris, we don't have to listen to you telling us to be cautious about being celebratory with such good numbers this time. I mean, you guys have put a lot of work into this. I mean, and this is the culmination of the direction of the growth that we've had, is a culmination of the years you spent and the energy you put in, and now Mrs. Anderson's been pushing on the wheel too. Good job. We're excited. I am.
I know it can be humbling, but we do need to celebrate a little bit.
Yeah. I said we just needed a new elementary principal, and things started shaping up.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
No, it's So obviously we could talk for hours about
Yeah.
this, and every year we attend a thing through CISA where we do talk for hours about this, and so yeah, it's there's definitely some things to feel good about there, and then as always, plenty to work on.
Is there a certain age group that showed the most growth?
That elementary, definitely. A certain grade level.
Yeah.
We'd have to dig into that to see which grade level. I think some of the upper wing classes, especially 6th grade, I think had a lot of growth last year. And 5th grade, I think, did pretty well too. So, yep. And some of the efforts that were made by some of those teachers in those grades are being shared and replicated as we speak. So, yeah, good question.
All right, we better move on then. Next item of business is the update on the district strategic planning work.
Not a ton. I just want to keep it on there as an agenda item. But just we've continued. We've had a couple more meetings of our admin team. We've had one more meeting with Dr. Sarin joining in with us on Zoom. Generally, we meet for a couple hours at a time. He's checking in with us about once a month, or maybe a little more, about once a month it averages. And then we're meeting, a couple times in between that as well to keep plugging away. And we're on track for our goal to have two of the scorecards completed by the end of the semester, with the goal of having all 4 scorecards completed by the end of the year. So.
All right, next item of business then is the 24-25 district calendar discussion.
And again, this is just a discussion because I wanted to check in with the board. So normally at this point in the year, I would have brought to you a calendar for next year. I know that the board talked about, some of the issues with the calendar, or just some questions about the calendar earlier in the fall, about start date and so on. And I think everybody in this room would love to be able to start school earlier in August like we used to. I took that very seriously. I wanted to do a little more checking into things. So I know some of our neighbor to the west, Amory, they started early this year. That was due to a construction waiver because of the project that they had going on. So they were allowed to start early by the DPI. And then in the last 3 years, A number of districts across the state have also, the DPI has been a lot more flexible with granting those waivers since COVID or during COVID and then the years after that. Basically this year, they said the party's over this year. They're not going to grant flexibility with start dates. So there's been some districts around us who people hear of like, well, they're starting here. Why can't we do that? They had a COVID waiver, perhaps, likely. So that is, they're back now to it has to be a major construction project or some other major extenuating circumstances that they're going to grant a waiver. There was also, I kind of wanted to wait a little bit there was some legislation circulating around in Madison, and every once in a while we hear this is getting some traction to undo the mandated September 1st start, that we would be able to start earlier. So that was late summer, September, that was being talked about, and I thought, well, let's wait a little bit and see if that gains traction. My optimistic side, I'm more pessimistic at this point that it's nothing. I mean, nothing's really happening with it, and I feel like we get teased with that every few years, and then it just never goes anywhere. So I'm not holding out on that much at all. But I will hold out hope, forever that hopefully we get back to that. It has to do with the tourism lobby in the state of Wisconsin. In the late 90s, they got that passed, and that is basically what it boils down to. So there are people who won't overturn that. And then the other part of that is part of our strategic planning process. We have been looking at, the metrics that we use and that we plan to use for student data, for measuring mainly student data. We want to think strategically about how we place our in-service days around when we do the student measurements, and then strategically putting in-service days after those so that we can work with our staff to have a full day without subs needed where we can dive into that. So that's another reason why we've kind of held off a little bit on the calendar, because we are kind of, with the strategic plan, trying to be a little more strategic, overuse the word, about where we put our in-service days. And then one other final thing is, and this is just a beginning of a discussion with the high school and parent-teacher conferences, is, how should parent-teacher conferences look in the future down the road? As times have changed with technology, the parent-teacher conferences at the high school have become less relevant for a lot of parents because, they can see their kids' grades online, they can communicate with their teachers pretty easily. So our attendance is going down for high school conferences for those reasons. So how can we look at them differently, or maybe use some of that contracted time a little bit differently? For the elementary, we're still getting 96% participation rate. The model is pretty successful there. So anyway, I just want you to know, if you're wondering, why haven't we seen a calendar yet? Those are some of the reasons why we've been kind of dragging our feet a little bit to play some of those things out, I guess. So that's all, just information on that.
All right, thanks, Chris. Next item of business is the update on the district facility study.
And again, just for our public to know, the steps that have been taken, we had, going back to the meeting in October when it was approved, Kraus Anderson worked with the admin team, worked with Tom Osmond, our maintenance director. They've been on site to do gather data, take pictures, get the age of things. Again, gather all kinds of data about our facilities, and that was shared last month. And then since then, we've also had a meeting with John Hunick of Kraus Anderson as an admin team to talk about educational needs and just kind of talk about each building. What are some things that maybe are lacking? We're not lacking a lot as far as meeting our educational needs, space needs, things like that. But thinking also a little bit of futuristic thinking about what are the things that if we had a crystal ball, or if we had funding or whatever, what would be some things that would enhance our facilities? So it's just kind of some future thinking, that's all, and just a discussion of analysis of both buildings. So that's where that sits.
Okay, thanks, Chris. The next item of business is the discussion of this year's district administrator evaluation timeline.
Okay, so I think I would recommend that we follow the same plan that's been followed last year and prior years. So it's here as a public agenda item in December. I think between now and the January meeting, typically then we would share the electronic form that the board members can complete to give input. And then I can share some things out too. The board would then submit those things. Then at the January meeting, what we've done typically is had a closed session to review the feedback between the board and superintendent. And then from that discussion, then between the January and the February meeting, then the board president has typically kind of compiled that, put it together into something meaningful, and then at the last, and then in February, another session with the closed session with the board and the superintendent to then kind of finalize it. And so that's the timeline that's been used in the past, if that's what the board wants to continue to do.
So just question, and I don't necessarily feel one way or the other, but at different times we've had the superintendent go through the form with us prior to it and just kind of explain some of the energies that he's put towards some of the things. Would that be valuable for any of the board members to see that happen this year or not?
I think even if you just pull together a presentation of what's been done.
I just
I
simply
don't think it has to correlate with the form itself, but I think a year in review is appropriate.
So maybe that January meeting is maybe where we do that and then fill out the survey after the between
That
January and
makes- that
February.
makes sense.
Do it that way.
Yeah, we'd like to know what you do around here, Chris.
It's hard to fill out the form if you haven't heard from me first. Yeah.
We'll
Okay.
give you an opportunity
Yeah.
before we grade you
Okay.
on that presentation.
That sounds good.
I agree.
Okay, so January, I'll come prepared. We'll have a closed session. I'll come prepared to share some things, and we can kind of go through the form together.
Yeah, sounds good.
Got it. And then we'll do the survey after that. Okay.
All right. Next item of business then, review of the school board election timetable.
Again, same information we had last month, just getting it out there to the public. Right now is the time that most candidates file for candidacy. December 22nd is the deadline for incumbents to say they're not running. And then January 2nd is the deadline for candidates to file for, to run for school board. At the next meeting in January, we would hopefully have candidates and draw the ballot order. And then this election is April 2nd. And then both Eddie and Christy are up for re-election.
Might be a primary though, if there's lots of people.
If there's a primary, that would be February 20th. Yep. So,
Yes. All right. And thank you both for running again. The next item of business is a discussion of the WASB State Education Convention.
again, just making sure. So I've got Matt and Corey as saying they want to go, so we'll get you registered. The early bird registration ends on Friday, so we're going to get you guys registered this week. If there's anybody else that's able to go. Again, I know that some of you have some major work challenges with being able to go, but also if somebody wanted to go just for a day or two and not stay for the whole thing. So that's just one more reminder of that.
Chris, have you talked with or spoken with Mr. Ayer about what the traditional stops have been on the way for the school board numbers when you bring them down there?
No, I have not.
I can share them with you a little bit later on if you want me
Okay.
to.
So hotels and stuff? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so we've got hotels reserved, and yep, everything is. We'll get it all organized.
Good.
So.
All right. The next item of business are board policies and approvals. This is the second reading. We've already gone through these, I think, didn't we,
Yeah,
last
so
month?
Okay.
Category 6, yeah, those A through K are ones that we did review at the last meeting. I don't recall a lot of questions on those.
They were pretty self-explanatory, I think. Do we want to just go through them, being as we went through them already? I mean, do we just want to approve them?
Yeah, because we talked about
We
them.
talked about it, so.
All right, well then I'll entertain a motion on A through K.
I move to approve the new updates and approvals for A through K for board policy.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve A through K. I suppose I had better read these. Board policies 3139, staff discipline. 4139, staff discipline. 5113, open enrollment program, interdistrict. 5200, attendance. 5500, student code of classroom conduct. 5505, academic honesty, that's a new one. 5517, student anti-harassment. 5530, drug prevention. 6151, return checks. 6236, community service fund, Fund 80, it's a new one. And 7440.01, video surveillance and electronic monitoring. It's been properly moved and seconded. Did we do that already?
Yep.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. All right, and then the next item of business are a group of new policies. Do we want to go through these at this time? How are we doing on time, you guys?
Good, we got about half hour.
All right, do we want to touch these this time, Chris, or how do you want to handle it?
Do you have highlights?
I have highlights, so I mean, I can tick through them pretty quickly. The first one, if you want to click into the documents, the first one, this is the most the one I had to remind myself. You know, I met with our Neola rep back in late September, October. I had to remind myself. So basically, we have currently a policy called student activity accounts, or student activity funds. What this policy does is it does a better job of describing or delineating between a district-sponsored student activity. For example, we did forensics tonight, or volleyball, versus a district-supported student activity and a non-district supported student activity. So non-district supported activity, and again, it's been several days since I went through this. So an example might be like the Scholarship Foundation. Yeah, is that what you said?
Post-prom?
Post-prom, yeah, parent post-prom committee. So these are basically accounts that we support those groups by having a school district account, or an account with our district funds, or not with our district funds, sorry, with our a district account, but it's non-district funds going into it. It's fundraising, and it's done to support student activities in our district, but it is a non-district activity. So it just does a better job of, right now they're all kind of lumped under one policy, and does a better job of just separating what the differences are between them. So it does the options at the top that are pink, that are highlighted or crossed out, shall be determined by the district administrator, was the choice that was made rather than the board. So every time we have, it does give the latitude of the district administrator to, for example, when we way back when created the account for the post-prom committee, it wasn't a board meeting decision, it was the district administrator had the latitude to create that. One of the highlights of, if it's a non-district supported activity account, that it's not me or a district person, it's the members of that group that would be the ones who make decisions about if and how the money is spent. So that's laid out in there. So I can't go in, or Mrs. Karnick, or can't go in and say how the post-prom committee is going to spend their money. Differentiates the district-supported, district-sponsored clubs. That's, again, those are under the purview of the district staff. Any questions about that one? Or?
No, good there.
And if anybody ever wanted to say, I want a better look at it, we've got obviously the month to do so, and it could always be tabled at next month and pushed off again too. So that's probably, I thought that was the most honestly in-depth one that made me look at it the closest. The next one, memorials for staff and students. This is something that has come up in other meetings that I've been at. We didn't have this policy, and it's a really good idea to have it. This just basically lays out that when you have the misfortune of having a staff member or a student pass away, that it just gives some guidance to how that process should look, that's unemotional, that's past it in time now when we're not dealing with the emotions of having that traumatic event happen. So it encourages memorials that are things like, a blood drive, or things that are an activity to memorialize a person, as opposed to putting up a plaque or putting up a permanent structure that becomes very difficult to then, for generations later, how do you deal with that, when it's maybe 30 years later, who's going to be the person who's going to say, we need to change that, or paint over that, or move that, or remodel that? Who's going to say that? So it's encouraging more different types of ways to memorialize, and also making a point that when there's a death by suicide, the appropriate response to that, so as not to glorify those types of events. So
I just saw here in the third paragraph, it says the board does not generally support permanent memorials, including blah 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 blah, and then it says
plaques.
Memorials are permissible only after a proposal is approved by, and there's no option for an approval of a.
It's meant to be board. The board is the one that's meant to be. The other ones are
because it's
X'd out.
okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the board is meant to be the one that would decide. Yep.
All right. That one looks good then to me, I guess.
Artificial intelligence.
That's a good one.
Fairly short pop, but basically it's just it's basically saying that it's a tool, that it should be used to support appropriate educational programs, but this is an area where all organizations and entities are trying to figure out how to deal with this.
I tell you how I deal with it. It's awesome.
There's a lot of great power to it. Yeah, we've been to presentations from WASA, WASDA, and there's amazing potential behind it.
Yeah.
But, yeah. The next one is notification of educational options. This is a new law that was a few years ago. This is just basically a legal requirement that it's married up to also the requirement to post your educational outcomes. So within 30 days. So I'll be publishing this within by the end of the week. Within 30 days of the official publishing of our state report cards, we have to do a public notice of what the results were and how each school ranks, and then attached with that at the same time, notification of educational options. So this just lays, and we did this last year. It's been a law for a little while. But this just makes that policy. It just matches what the statute is. Public records, I'm trying to think what the change is here. This just is meant to reflect the changes. Do you remember when we talked a few months ago about adopting the general records schedule?
Yeah.
This is pretty much that. So I was feeling antsy, like we're supposed to have something passed. Well, Neola kind of did it here for us now too. So that's what that is. Food services. This clarifies. Basically, the big part in here is modifications for medical documentation. So if students have legitimate food allergies, there would be a medical documentation to provide an alternative for them. It's not just based on parent request or a student's intolerance to a food. It's an actual food allergy that poses a health condition. So, and then also.
So how does that relate to like a red 40?
A what?
A red 40.
What's a red 40?
Like the dye.
Food dye?
Because that isn't quite an allergy either. It's
Right.
more of an intolerance.
Yeah, I would say, I guess if a student had a documented allergy to it, and a doctor wrote a note saying this student shouldn't have red 40, then that would be provided to the food service staff, and they would know to watch for items.
It would
like
need
that.
to be
So I can't
connected
apparently
to
say I don't want my student to have Red 40.
You
They
can, but it
can.
would be up to the kid.
I mean, that's a specific ingredient. I mean, it's hard for a kid to know what, going through the lunch line, what's got that ingredient.
Exactly. That's the problem.
Yeah.
All right.
Free and reduced price meals, again, this is just modifying the non-discrimination statement is just rewritten differently. How a person would complain about non-discrimination, and people who speak languages other than English or who are visually impaired, to how to be able to get alternate means to get the form to fill out the application for free and reduced price meals. Next one, 8700, this is a nursing mothers policy. This is a new policy. This reflects a law that was passed a little over a year ago that gave specific rights to employees who are nursing mothers. This just basically puts it into a board policy what the new law says. One of the options was that we do not want to elect to take. In my opinion, my recommendation is that a person would not be compensated for the time. Like, let's say we have a teacher and it's part of their salaried day, and they have a prep time and they go express milk for 15 minutes. That by policy you could say, well, then they would not get paid for that period of time. I don't think we want to. There's no reason for that. Then we need to do that. So that's the option that was crossed off, which is virtually what every school, every business would do. So the next one is Section 504 ADA, prohibition against disability discrimination. So this goes directly with the one below it. Basically, we had 1623, 3123, and 4123, which were all prohibition against disability discrimination in employment. Instead of having one for support staff, one for teaching staff, and one for administration, there's one policy, 8913. So there's no changes to it. It's just putting it all into one policy. That's what our rep said. Neil was trying to do a better job of not having three different policies that all say the same thing. So then that last one would be those last three would be rescinded. That's noted on there too. So those are the first reading policies. So certainly, if you have deeper questions, make sure to note them. If there's something in the meantime between now and the next meeting, if you wanted me to look into it more, I would be happy to do that. So that's it for policies.
All right, next item of business, superintendent notes.
Okay, find it here. So Friday night, the Clouds Choir, our choir students were allowed to participate in the Clouds Choir event at Mall of America. So we had a number of kids who went down to that for a field trip and an event. Obviously, we had the band concert last week. We got the choir concert tonight. I'm talking fast so we can get there. And the elementary concert is on December 21st. We've continued to have ongoing visits with our CISA consultants, working with our professional learning community groups. We've had a lot of that going on in the last few months. Parent-teacher conferences at the high school were a week ago, or last Thursday. Winter sports, we're into the competitions now, and we're also having a staff holiday party get-together on the last day before break on the 22nd. So that's just a few brief things. So.
All right, next item of business is then contemplated closed session, I believe.
Yes.
Thank you for coming, everybody. Contemplated closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, paragraph 1C and 19.85, paragraph 1G. The board will discuss employee compensation and discuss a personnel matter. I will pull the board. Nettie?
Yes.
Mr. Munson?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Christy?
Yep.
And Matthew. We are in closed session.
You guys assign.
All right, we're back in open. I will entertain a motion on the consideration and approval of contract for bookkeeper training specialist. We're not making a motion.
We're not making a
Nope,
motion.
we're
No,
not.
there's no
That's
action
just
taken.
hold
All right,
Yep.
so I will entertain a motion to
Future agenda?
adjourn. Oh yeah, future agenda. Anybody got anything they want to put on a future agenda?
Nope.
Now I'll entertain a motion.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
6:59.
Motion passes. We are adjourned.